Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Willsea, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Mastering the Next is a cutting edge podcast exploring the future of graduate, online, and non traditional education through the lens of technology and artificial intelligence. Staying competitive in the world of graduate student recruitment and enrollment means keeping up with the ever evolving tech trends in higher ed. Join Dr. Ray Lutsky, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451, as he explores what's next at the dynamic intersection of student recruitment and leading edge technology. Each episode will explore future trends and the technologies shaping the academic landscape of the 21st century. Listeners will be equipped with strategies to meet the evolving needs of today's online and non traditional learners. New episodes drop every other Friday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Mastering the Next wherever you get your podcasts.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys. Welcome to Learning from Leaders, a special 5-part Pulse Check series on leadership and management brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Dr. Carrie Phillips, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at UA Little Rock. My goal is to help aspiring leaders step into their next role with confidence. So, over the next 5 weeks, you'll hear candid conversations with successful higher education leaders who share their personal journeys, lessons learned, and practical advice on a variety of topics, ranging from managing teams and overseeing budgets to setting vision and building campus collaboration. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Learning from Leaders. This is the podcast that brings you insights and strategies to help train that next generation of marketing leaders. I'm your host. I'm Carrie Phillips, the Chief Communications and Marketing Officer here at UA Little Rock. And today we are hitting on a topic that is so crucial to the work of marketing. And we have an amazing guest with us today to help as we explore how to navigate budget as a strategic tool. And so joining us is Kate Ledger from Old Dominion University Global, and she is a visionary in the higher ed space and talking about budgets and emphasizing marketing's role in the work that we do. So Kate, it's fantastic to have you with us.
Great to see you, Carrie. I'm really happy to be here.
So I want to kind of start with the basics because I think that's one of the things that we don't even hit on enough. And so can you talk us through some of the various types of marketing budgets that folks might face and offer some insights on how to manage those?
Sure. I'm happy to talk about budgets and the space, especially if you're new in the role. Traditional higher education budgets don't typically include marketing. I think that administration and faculty aren't really used to investing or setting aside money for the traffic for your website or to build out a brand campaign or whatever the work is that you're doing. So it's really important to try to carve out very specific, defined, separate budgets. And so you want to think about what are the tools that you need to get the work done. Clearly, the people and the staff are typically a very large part of higher education marketing budgets. But what are the different vendors that you might need to partner with to advertise or to build out that brand? So there's a lot of different pieces to think about, but I think it's really important, again, to be separate and defined from any other budgets within the university. And the way to do that really is to start with understanding the people, get curious about who are the financial teams at the institution that you're working with, and then also the spreadsheets, right? Looking at what is currently available, diving in and understanding how money is allocated, whether that's on an annual basis or a one-time basis.
And I think you make a really good point there. And it's something I've been guilty of saying before is, oh, I'm a creative. I don't do numbers. But that's probably the biggest mistake in this that we can make is to be successful. I think we really have to become numbers people.
Yes, absolutely. I have the same sentiment, right? That typically in our space, we're very much excited about all of the ideas except the math. But it's not something to be afraid of. It's really something to step into and understand. And you can find resource. Again, there's people on your campus that want to help. There's often people on your team who are willing and able to help as well. So it's really important to take the time and understand the math and embrace those numbers because they really will drive you towards your strategic goals.
And talking about that exactly, that strategic piece, what are some practical tips or advice that you can give folks to use budget strategically to advance those goals that they might have?
I think it's really important that we're tying budgets to measures of success. So, when you're looking at your strategic plan, what are the KPIs for you to reach those goals? How is that tied into what the broader institution is doing? Very often in higher education, that's enrollment, that's fundraising, right? So, we want to think about how does that budget tie back to enrollment goals or to fundraising goals? And honestly, a lot of times the other people in your institution who sit in those spaces are also investing in some type of marketing as well. And so if you can think about how you as a whole are investing in enrollment and fundraising and truly marketing to bring success to all of those, I think it's a really great way to start to think about the very strategic outcomes of the money that you're spending.
I think that's important, that strategic kind of tie-in and having to sometimes educate people about what are those marketing metrics, what are those important things. Many of our listeners might be facing the challenge of having to justify these expenditures to folks who don't understand marketing, who aren't familiar with those metrics. How do you give them advice about communicating the value of marketing in a way that resonates to others on their campus?
So I think that most people, hopefully all people in a leadership role like that, understand revenue. And so we really want to start to again tie that enrollment or the fundraising, the revenue back to the marketing that we're doing. I think that's harder to do if you're in a place in your institution that is focused entirely on brand. Maybe you have to uphold that brand and reputation. And so you may not have a direct tie to either of those things, but in reality, the brand work does tie directly to enrollment and fundraising. So I think it's really important that you are tying those KPIs back, that when the university is celebrating enrollment or fundraising or other work, research work as well, research definitely at R1 institutions in particular requires that promotion of the work that's being done. Can you tie all of those KPIs back on a regular basis with your leadership and that this work was affected by marketing? I also think it's really important that this is not one and done. Repetition is really important. You have to continue to raise the flag for the work that you're doing in the institution at every opportunity you get. And while you might feel like a broken record, continuing to do that is going to start to really make sure that your leadership understands and sees that tie very vividly.
You hit on something there, that this relationship piece is going to be really important to make sure that those folks in leadership positions, A, continuously hear that message from marketing, but also begin to understand the impact of it. And so, as we think about budgeting and budget season, that process across institutions is usually sometimes complex. It's also sometimes a little political. Can you share some tips that you might have engaged in how to help build collaboration during that process, especially for those new leaders who are maybe navigating this for the first time?
I think so often you said that, it's a little political. I think it can get, very heavily political, in fact, as relating to money in higher education institutions, really in any organization. And I think it's really important to tread lightly at first. Building relationships, whether it's in your budget piece, it's in your team management, right? Whatever the work that you're doing, that relationship building is so important to the work that we all do in marketing and higher education. So you want to start there. I think it's important that we're getting curious. It's really great to ask questions. Help me understand how the budget is built. Help me understand where the revenue is coming from or how this money is being pulled in. I don't think we want to let people tell us this is how we've always done it. Don't let that statement get in the way of continuing to ask the questions. And as I said, in treading lightly, we're not making demands. We're just asking, we're trying to understand before we start to move forward. That will really help in your relationship building as well.
I think that's a really great point because sometimes I think as new leaders, especially, there's that sense of, oh, I'm new at this. I have to make my footprint, leave that legacy. And so, yeah, there is some value in that, just pausing and really asking the questions to understand before moving into that questioning phase.
Yes, I think we've all worked with or seen the leader who has made the footprint, right? And that leaves a mark. And that's not always a positive thing. So I do think sort of stepping back, asking questions, being curious is a better road to get you where you want to be rather than sort of making those demands up front.
And at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned this idea that traditional budgets don't often account for marketing. And so, as that new CMO or as that new leader, working to advocate towards changing that, what are some strategies to kind of move that needle in the long term without necessarily making those demands, to your point?
So I think most institutions don't have new money coming in. We're all in, where we sit in the industry, the value of higher education overall. It's not like we have this influx of money that we can suddenly have as a marketing budget. So very often we hear the word reallocation, and it's really a place to start for where are we spending money as an institution that maybe has been spent in a more traditional way, that we need to start to think about what makes more sense for our audiences. So if we have been doing more print advertising or old school marketing, as they say, where can we start to invest in digital advertising? Where can we start to think about, well, how are our audiences making decisions now that we need to adjust where that money is coming from? So I think reallocation is a great place to start. I think thinking about other areas of the institution like IT, those tools like the CRM or the CMS don't work well without the marketing aspects of those, right? So if we're investing in the tools, we also need to invest in the strategies and the marketing and frankly the people to make those tools successful. So if we want to drive our CRM to engage more people, we want to think about our budget that is allowing us to do that. So I think the combination of reallocation, looking at other areas of the institution and where you can strategically tie back to those goals, which we keep talking about, is really going to be a good place to start.
Confession time. As a new leader, I was not the best at focusing on measuring and reporting and the impact that that could have. That was not something I was great at when I first got into this work. Can you give some advice about how to do that work and how to use measuring, reporting, looking at those KPIs as a way to really tell that story of what marketing and communications teams are doing?
I think it ties back to what we talked about earlier. We feel like we're not math people necessarily, and we want to set that aside and really embrace those spreadsheets and start to look at that information on a regular basis. You might have to put it in your calendar to get very basic to make sure you're visiting that on a regular basis. I think another great way to do that, and this will help the people coming up behind us, is to ensure your team is being fiscally responsible. So if they're asking for particular tools, if they need the new social media monitoring system, or if they need a project management system, make sure that they are a part of building out a budget for that. What does that look like? Having them submit a proposal. We do this for professional development as well. So yes, we want to say, of course, you can, explore all those amazing opportunities, whether it's a conference or a new book or joining an association. But what is the cost of that? And what does that look like for you? We're really investing. So I think starting to pull the team in a little bit earlier, that way, as those leaders come up, they will have had that exposure to the budgets as well.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I really like that idea that even if can't give those members of your team that complete unfettered access to everything, because that may not be realistic, that there are small things you can do in everyday work that kind of teaches them some of those skills and those thinking processes.
Yes, I wish someone had forced me to look at the spreadsheets earlier in my career. So I hope to help, my team members do that, right? When they're asking for particular things, asking them to think about the budget and what would an estimate look like for that, so that they can start to understand how those numbers play out across our team.
Such good wisdom right there. Budget decentralization is another common challenge that, because there's not this necessarily centralized marketing work, there may be some that exist in college A and some dollars in college B. How, as a marketing leader, can you offer some strategies to kind of pull those things together to be more centrally strategic in our approach?
One of the things that we did at the University of Pittsburgh was to take some budget that we had that was for traditional dollars. So, this is going back to the idea of reallocation and really looking at that budget and starting to think about a couple of different things. One is people. We knew that within each of the areas of the academic units, they didn't necessarily have the expertise they needed. And we didn't want each of those academic areas to hire individuals, but we could hire two individuals centrally that could support all of those academic units in a very strong way. And so reallocating some of that traditional print money for salaries
Yeah.
was one step in that process. We also developed what I would call grant funding, so that the each academic unit could submit a proposal based on what they'd like to do, particularly in graduate marketing. These dollars were supported by the Vice Provost for Graduate Studies. And so her strategic goals were very clear. She was very targeted at online education. And so if you had a program in an academic unit that you wanted to help support, we would help you do that. So not only was that dollars, which were really important, but it was also the expertise of our team. We knew where to find the digital advertising. We knew how to understand your audiences or get the market research or develop the materials that supported the diversity of the programs that you're working with. So putting together proposals, working with them. And there was also a bit of a match required, right? So if we're going to put dollars in, we're asking the academic units to do the same. That really helped us to take some centralized dollars that we were spending in, frankly, an older area, and
Yeah.
pushing that out across the institution. And what it does is it gives those deans and the leaders in the units visibility to
Mhm.
the budget and how it's spent. And when they start to see progress in one small area, they're much more likely to support marketing across their schools or programs.
I also imagine that because of that match piece that was happening, it really helped everybody to be aligned with how does this work toward our overall strategic goals while still meeting what that particular academic unit was hoping to achieve.
Yes, exactly. Really important that those programs are also investing, right? That they're understanding. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. In fact, we do this at ODU Global now as well. We do a lot of in-person conferences. And while the ODU Global team doesn't necessarily attend, the programs do attend, and they can't afford the table and the sponsorship and all the pieces that go with that. So we help provide that sponsorship. We like to get our name out there. It also builds relationships, going back to
Yeah.
conversations we had earlier, Carrie, about, really starting to build those relationships. It matters. And so having everyone put a little bit into that budget really does help everyone understand why this matters and how it works.
And I think that's a really strong point of that collaboration piece and that relationship. You're spot on. So, right now we're heading toward the end of that fiscal year. And that means that budget can sometimes become a little frantic when folks realize, oh, we have, end of year one time monies. Let's try to use those really quickly. What are some of your strategies to help use those dollars for intentional, meaningful gains, but yet also remembering that we have to manage budgets kind of across an annual basis as well?
I think it's really easy for leaders who are not in the marketing space, but maybe who we are reporting to rely on one-time funding for marketing. It feels easy for them to sort of throw money at a thing and see what's going to happen, whether that's going to, grow the enrollment or the brand or whatever that is. But I would encourage you not to rely on one-time money for your marketing budgets. Continue to build the case for a solid annual budget tied to your strategic plan. One-time money is great for experimenting. You can get a few deans on board if you invest a little bit of money. Again, whether you're doing that through that grant program or you're just deciding, you know what, we're going to support a new program that's coming on board. We'll do the digital advertising for that. We'll help set up your communications and your journeys, right? We'll do all this work. And if you get 5 or 10 students, that's going to more than pay for the investment that we've just put in to your program. And if you can get a few deans to see the value of that, they can help you bring a few other deans on board in that process, right? There is a little bit of competition, I think, between most academic deans. And so using that one-time funding to experiment and help bring people on board and educate those leaders is a great way to use those dollars.
I think that's so smart. And I think the other, piece of that is that sometimes one-time money gives us those opportunities to secure things that, whether that's equipment or, some other kinds of things that we might not be able to do more annually. How do you coach your teams as we talk about those proposals to use those one-time money strategically?
I think what you said about, the tools or the areas that we really want to invest in that can use one-time money. As we know in marketing, digital transformation is happening here faster than in most industries. So, this one time money in the space is really important. I think AI is a fabulous example of this. If you can get, for example, Chat GPT Pro for your team and build out a branded Chat GPT so that you are expediting the content creation, and that is done with one time money, you can start to prove the value of things like that as well. So, it's also an experiment, right? Not
Yes.
experimenting necessarily with those academic deans, but experimenting with new tools that are out in our market, which just changes by the month.
And shifting gears a little bit, some of the latest data from our friends at Simpson Scarborough shows that we're seeing increases in marketing budget. And that is, the good news. As a new manager or a leader who gets that windfall, it can be tempting to spend that in a lot of really immediate ways and not think about those long-term moments. How do you coach a new leader to strategically capitalize on revenue investments as opposed to thinking about it from a short-term perspective?
I think oftentimes the best answer for the long term investment is for staff. Staff can really support the efforts across the institution. You want to hire those team members who have deep expertise, who can focus in a particular area and really start to show value very quickly. And investing in them long term is really great for the institution. So, social media is a really good example of this. Several years ago, there was maybe a half-time social media coordinator. Now we're seeing full teams. I truly believe in leveling up that experience and expertise in that space, but you've got to put the dollars in there and you need the long-term funding to do that. So I would recommend starting with staff if you have the ability to do that and you have long-term fundings. I also think that tying it back to your strategic plan is really important. So again, don't sort of throw money at the thing to maybe get some of your metrics up quickly, but think about what can you invest in that will over the long term help you meet the goals, whether that's quantity or quality or whatever it is your institution is focused on.
During your tenure, and you've been at a couple of different institutions, I have as well. Every institution does budget a little bit differently. Whether that's, how the process, the software, whatever that is, it's never exactly the same at every place. And so talk a little bit about how you learn basic budget skills and how you can collaborate with that procurement team to kind of understand how your institution manages that process.
I've been at ODU Global for a little over 9 months, and I feel like, especially when I talk with our procurement team or the financial team within ODU Global, that I continue to say, I just want to understand how this works. Don't make any assumptions about what may have happened at your previous institution, or maybe you were in a totally different organization, a corporation or an agency. It's really best to be very humble and get curious. Again, we talked about that earlier in the conversation. Ask the questions, can I see the budget? We have really great onboarding here at ODU Global. Really excited about the influx of information I got when I came on board. And then, 6 months later, I had to ask again because it was so much information at the beginning of when I started the position. So don't be afraid to ask. You'll start to realize as you build the relationships who you want to go to, who is doing this well, who is getting funding in the institution, and what that is for. I hope that it is often tied back to those strategic goals, and that you can do the same as well. But really, it's asking the questions and getting curious.
I love that phrase, getting curious. That's something I'm going to take with me because we need to be more curious with these areas that we don't always engage with, or to your point, maybe we heard that information at the beginning, but it's been a minute.
Yes. And it's okay to admit that we don't remember or we didn't capture that. Or we might think something is going one way and it's going another. So yes, continuing to ask the questions I think is really important.
As we wrap up today, what are some final practical tips or strategies that you want those new leaders to know to help them navigate budgeting effectively?
I think, well, you said it best, right? Don't assume that you are not a math person. We can all embrace this area of budgeting, and it's really important in your leadership journey to make sure that you feel confident in the work that you're doing, and that includes your budgeting work because it is tied to your strategic goals. I think it's really important to invest in your people. To invest in those tools. And then we talked about experimenting, trying out a few different things if you have the opportunity to do so, because that is where you will learn and start to educate other areas of the institution. And I would just end with that idea of get curious, because asking the questions about your budget, about what can be done, is really great conversation for all of us.
Thank you, Kate, so much for joining us. Your insights are so valuable, and I know that I am taking with me this idea of getting and staying curious. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on Learning from Leaders. And just remember that understanding and leveraging your budget is not just key to surviving, but thriving in the marketing landscape within higher education. Until next time, keep learning and leading.
This Pulse Check mini-series has been brought to you by Pathify. Gone are the days of clunky interfaces, disjointed systems, and massive, unhelpful link farms. Centralize all your systems with Pathify so that students see the information that matters to them in a digital experience that actually makes sense. From prospective students through alumni, it's about time the student experience started looking and acting like a consumer app from this century. Visit pathify.com for more. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.